Hey,
welcome
Laura.
to the LinkedIn Live. Well, for
Thank you.
whoever does not know who Robin is, he is one of the most exciting people to talk with in Denmark. And it's not a joke because, like, if I imagine a party I would like to arrange of people, you would be one of the people who has to be in the party. And it's like, do you get that a lot? Like, that people really want to talk with you all the time?
Well, I feel so honored. I mean, like being on the party list is no small feat, you know. I
No.
mean, I always think like Barack Obama would be cool, you know,
In
like
Denmark, in Denmark,
Lady
like
Gaga.
ground
You know, I'm
yourself,
like,
okay?
okay. I get it. Thank you, thank you.
But the fun fact is, so Robin and I have been following you forever. But the first time I met you was in London and we did the run. You joined our run and I was crazy surprised. This Robin, oh, you speak Danish? She says, yeah, Gaia. I was like, what? So you could be a spy, not
I
just
could be. I could be.
it's like, yeah. So, Robin, before we're
Yes.
gonna dig into everything you've experienced and so
Okay.
on, give a little
Sure.
intro how you do the elevator pitch about yourself at a party for people.
Well, first of all, I love the hat. By the way, I'm like, I really have to up my hat game. I mean, I have some cool shades that I usually post pictures of, you know, on
Yes.
LinkedIn, but that hat is next level. I love it. Yes, so I mean, I was born and raised in Denmark, and but I've always been a nerd. And so when I was 21, I ended up buying a one-way ticket to California. I didn't have a job or a place to stay. I didn't know a single person. I just had this kind of burning desire that I didn't want to look back on my life and regret not having the courage to follow my heart. I've always been driven by like wanting to make a difference in the world. And I love how technology kind of can change and impact the way that we work and the way that we live, and just kind of like has such a positive impact on our world. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some downsides to it as well, but overall, I think it's a net positive. And I flew over there in February 1st, 2000, and didn't have a job, as I said. I just applied to every company I could find on Craigslist, this like really dorky website, which is still around. It hasn't changed for like I think 30 years. And I ended up, because this was at the height of the dot-com era and I knew how to code, I ended up getting a couple of job offers. And I took a job at a startup in Silicon Valley. And a month after I got there, the whole economy crashed. And I'm like, whoa, holy shit. And so this company, this startup company with like 30 people, did not end up making it. So 6 months later, I was out of a job. And then I hustled my way to another job and I found another one. And then 4 months later, that company also went, under. It's kind of like I got laid off from there. And so the first year was really tough. And I mean, it's so funny how life works. When if you zoom in on just that period, I would look like an abject failure, right? Like, oh, the first two companies, you didn't make it, or they didn't make it. What a bad choice, and so on. But then when you zoom out over the last 20 years, I luckily had a more hits than I had, failures. I worked early days at Salesforce and came into Box and helped IPO that company. And then I was a small startup in Silicon Valley. Then, of course, I was at LinkedIn, which is a massive company that I use and all you use and know every day. And then I went to WeWork, which was amazing, but an abject failure also in many ways, And then I took the last company I was at. But long story short is I met my wife in 2001 in California. We got married in 2003. And maybe, I don't know if it's about being Danish or maybe being progressive or what it is, but I always felt like this idea that women should lose their name, and kind of like this idea that the patriarchy's name is stronger in some ways. So I just felt antiquated. So in 2003, I took her last name. So I don't sound Danish. Like, if you think about, like, I get this question a lot, like, you don't sound Danish at all. I'm like, no, I don't have a Danish name because I took her name. Daniel's, it used to be Gertsen, by the way, which is a horrible name. And I don't sound Danish when I speak. I sound like a California dude in many ways. So, but I took her name because I felt it was the right thing to do, the progressive thing to do. I wanted to I want to have a world that's where we're all like equal and doing things for the right reasons. But it was also selfishly, I wasn't close to the family name itself. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, and I lived with my mother, but she had a different name. So I didn't have a strong relation to the Gertsen name, which is my dad's name. And we got closer towards the end of his life. He died many years ago, but it was never close to that name. But when I met my wife and her family, I felt really close to them, and I loved her and her family, and I wanted to be a part of that. So
That's amazing. And you're back in Denmark right now
I
with a
am back in
background
Denmark
where
now.
our office is, but not close to us. You're back in
It's so
Denmark.
funny. It's so funny being back because I don't speak Danish work-wise very well. So I always speak socially. I speak Danish fine, right? But technology, language is like technology, it gets outdated very quickly. So when I speak Danish, my friends always make fun of me. It's like, oh, this is what we said 25 years ago. I sound so antiquated, so uncool. So at work, I always try to speak English, and I always say, oh, even when I go give presentations at companies, luckily I get invited to speak at a lot of different places. I always say, I'll do it if I can do it in English. I never do it in Danish. I'm just not comfortable enough in Danish. Speak on stage. You know?
So in 2 days, I'm going to Kolding. On Thursday,
Mm,
I'm giving a
mm.
presentation in the marketing camp in Danish.
Oh,
So
you're so
this is
hardcore. You're so
the first
hardcore.
time I'm going to do this, like on the stage
Can
with
I just say
500 people.
you are badass. I mean, that would terrify me. And I feel like I'm decent at public speaking, but that would terrify me to no end.
Oh, no, we'll see. We'll see how it works. Okay,
Yeah.
so people who are on the chat and following us live, feel free to ask any questions. We're going to dig into how to choose companies to work for, what are the successes. And I really, really loved your post today about the culture anchor. We're going to speak about that as well. And Benjamin, hello. Yes, thank you. The hat, you need one as well. Like for a French person,
Exactly.
that fits so well on you. And whoever else has questions, feel free to jump in and ask because, well, we've got Robin for a 30 minutes party. Let's use that time, huh? Okay. So your career story started mostly in California. Now you're back
Yes.
in Denmark. So when choosing the companies to work for, what did you look for in companies?
Yeah. So for me, there's really three core elements that I think are non-negotiables that I always think about. And it's gotten clearer over time for me. And there's nothing wrong. At some point in your life, you might chase money or title or more responsibility. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But I think those are like short-term things that will give you maybe short-term pleasure, honestly, or short-term happiness. I don't think long-term, you don't wake up every day thinking about the title you have or how much money you're making and so on. And again, don't get me wrong, they are important, but they're not like the end all be all. I think for me, there are really kind of three things that are super important. Number one is, do they have a mission that I believe in that I can get excited by? And I'll tell you a story. So after I went from Box, I joined a company called Vera, which is a cybersecurity company. We were doing like encryption around documents, very related to Box, Dropbox, and so on. Basically, and the moment a file, if I send you a link to a Dropbox or a Box file, the moment you download it, I have no idea what you're doing. So the idea was, let's add on security encryption to that document so I can trace it anywhere it goes. Makes sense. Lots of need for it. And I worked there for like 2.5 years. But the last 6 months or so of that, my time there, we grew it from, I was employee number 8. We went out and got funding. We scaled it to like 120 people, over 10 million in ARR. So it was good run. But the last 6 months of, after 2 years, I kept waking up every day just not excited by this mission I'm on. I mean, like the world needs cybersecurity, and God bless the people who created. I'm just not personally excited. I was tired of, because so much of it's based on fear or doom and gloom and like protecting, yourself and like. And I was going to these conferences. I remember there's like these old cranky white dudes talking about hackers or war scenarios, and I'm just like, oh, this is not. And I come from an environment with Salesforce and Boxers around collaboration and getting humans to be the best version of themselves. And so I left, but that's where mission to me is so important. I mean, it's very hard, I think, doing the best work of your life when you wake up every day and you're not excited about what you do. So that's number one. Number two is going to a place where you really can make a difference, where it's clear that you can make. So the way I came into this company, LMS 365, there's many reasons I ended up here, but I went for a run with the CEO, Rasmus. I like running, if that's not clear yet, right? So we went for a run, and during that like hour run, it was mostly him talking, and he just basically told me all the things that were not going so well, that needed to get fixed, and things we could do better, and so on. I mean, obviously the company's done well, or else I wouldn't kind of join. Like they're hitting it on many fronts. But I like coming in and being able to make a difference. That's just my style. There's some people who like to come in and tweak and optimize and make things incrementally better, and then there are people, I think, at the other end of the spectrum who come in and like do bigger things and kind of try new things, and some of it works and some of it doesn't work. I just like go to a place where I can really make a difference, where it's so clear to me. So I said after that run to Ras, I'm like, this is awesome. I'd love to like join you on this journey. So number two is like impact, and that's different scales and for different reasons, you know. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very fulfilling for somebody like me. And then number three is around culture. And people. It's like I just don't want to work with assholes. I'm just like I've worked with enough in my time in Silicon Valley. Luckily, I worked with a lot of good people, but I also worked with a lot of jerks. So after I left Vera, this company in 2017, I was really wanting to get back into working with something that I believed in, but also just an environment that I think was much more exciting. So I was speaking deeply with four companies. It was Asana, LinkedIn, Airbnb, and Uber, and I was pretty like deep in these, and I love all of them for different reasons. They're all like amazing companies, and I felt like so lucky to like be able to chat with them and be engaged with them. But I remember going into the Uber office, and everyone in there just seemed kind of stressed. Mm-hmm. And they have frowny faces, and there's a lot of tension in the air. There was no laughter or joy. And I just remember leaving, going, and this was before the scandal hit and all that kind of stuff back in, I think, 2017 or 18. I can't remember, but a couple of years ago. I just remember leaving, going like, you can't pay me enough to work in an environment like this. Just doesn't feed my soul and what I'm looking for. And when I went into Asana or Airbnb or LinkedIn, everyone's like happy and high-fiving each other, hugging each other, and just like this an environment of camaraderie and collaboration and laughter and joy. And I'm like, this is kind of what I want. And of course, I ended up going to LinkedIn because LinkedIn is a platform that's just changed my life. I mean, it was so exciting to join that ride, and it's. At that point in time, it was the biggest company I'd ever worked for. I think we were close to 15,000 people. But I just like LinkedIn has transformed my relationships, my life. You know, people find me. Like I wouldn't have those opportunities if it wasn't for LinkedIn. It's just the truth, you know.
So
anyway, so I look for those three things. I look for mission, impact, and people. And then there's a lot of other smaller things. Of course, I want to get paid well. I want to be successful. I want a company that's growing. But those three are non-negotiables to me.
So cool. My next question actually was like, when you choose a company to work for and it feels like it's kind of a match, but what do you weight more, money or culture? I got your answer. It's like,
I mean, it's definitely.
You also mentioned like Uber cannot pay enough for me to suffer. It's like, is there a limit that they could pay you to stay, or whichever company is like, oh, this is like, we know the culture is not that great, but if we get Robin, pay him really a lot of money, and he would be the cultural person in there, would you go?
That's a great question. I don't think so. It's just not the way my mind works or the way I was kind of raised or like the way I see the world. I mean, it might sound like a little fatalistic, but I think life is just too short for this, you know? And I do know life is both short and long at the same time, which is kind of ironic, right? But I just think, you know, I mean, the idea of waking up every day and kind of just being so, how am I going to do the best work of my life if I'm just not enjoying what I'm doing? I just don't see that happening. And I've actually been offered some decent roles, and there's just always something in me that goes like, no, I've never been one chasing money. And it's good to be clear. There's nothing wrong with like chasing money if that's what you need. But when I'm at least lucky enough now, early in my career, of course, I was just doing whatever I could to survive. But now when I have the opportunity to choose a little bit more picky, I feel honestly, I have an obligation to choose something because I know that when people do great work, they unleash a creative force and energy that I think that we need in the world to solve so many of the bigger macro issues, whether that's war or inequality or climate change or all these things that businesses have to solve a day in there. How are we supposed to solve this if we're not excited by showing up to work every day? It's just like, it blows my mind. So I know it's a fortunate position to me, and I don't take it for granted, but because I have that option, I'm definitely not in the mind that I want to do it just one. And said I'm not an idiot either. Of course, I want to make money, and like, because to me, money is never the outcome. To me, it's freedom. I grew up very poor. My parents were super hippies, and I could see how much poverty inhibited people from living the lives that they really wanted. And so for me, it's never been about money. I think that's just a vehicle to freedom. To me, it's about, I don't want anybody in any part of my life telling me how to live or what to do. I want to be able to have the freedom to kind of live the life on my terms, you know, and money is a way to get there for sure. So there's nothing bad with money, but it's not to have money just to have money. I mean, it's like, how uninspiring is that? I think.
Love that. And Benja has a question about similar stuff, but more about the failures. So what do you see the commonalities between the projects or companies that attribute to failure?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's sometimes there's a failure. I mean, there's so many different things. It's a really great question because sometimes it could be a failure of culture, of leadership, of purpose. So, for example, let's take WeWork, which is a company that everyone knows, and you know, I came in and had the hype, the when the cycle of hype was going up, up and up. You know, I came in, it was worth $20 billion, then it became worth $47 billion, and then we were going towards an IPO, and then it all came crashing down. And it was very painful. And there are many reasons for why that is. Of course, one of them was way too hyped. You know, now when you look back, it's easy to see, but at that point in time, you know, it wasn't as easy to see. The way I got into this, so I was working at LinkedIn, is and they had actually started coming to me. We were asking me to, you know, if I wanted to be a part of this, and I'm like, I'm at LinkedIn. I'm very happy. They pay well. I love the culture and mission and all that kind of stuff. And they kept kind of coming back to me and like, hey, you know. And then I went out. Two things happened. One, I was having a dinner with some CMO friends in San Francisco, and these were six CMOs from like Slack, Asana, some great companies out there that I really admired. Some of my very close friends, and we were just kind of like, we would talk about companies we'd love to work for. And three of the CMOs, I'm not kidding, said that if they could choose any job, they would love to be a CMO at WeWork. And I went and go like, am I missing something? What am I missing? Like, because they've been asking me to come join. And so then I'm like, like, maybe I should look into it. I started looking into it, the culture and the vision. I'm like, oh, that's pretty exciting. And then second thing that happened was they reached out and said, Adam Newman is going to be in town in San Francisco, and he'd love to meet with you. Can you spare an hour? I said, yes, for sure. Like, who am I to say no to that? So I met with them. It was just like very compelling. So that's how I got into it, because of the vision and the culture and the mission we're on. Now, what I think failed from that is, like, I think the ambition was high. There's no doubt when you look back now, it was overinflated from a valuation point of view. But that's just one outcome. I think the other thing that happened is we were very good at selling, you know, office space masqueraded as something bigger than office space, right? It was really kind of you joining a movement of something that was a little bit bigger than yourself, like being part of something that wasn't just about work, but about, we want to create a different world for all of us where we're kind of in this together and so on. I think that was exciting. The moment when I reflect back personally on it, that we started talking about elevating the world's consciousness and it became so lofty, I think we started losing people from the core of the mission. And I think it was a failure of me and probably the rest of the leadership team of not being able to articulate really well what that new mission is. I think the way you get people and the market excited about what you do is you have a very clear vision that is easy to understand, and you're able to directly connect your products to that vision. Well, so it's easy to connect, you know, selling office space to creating a world where people have more joy in their life. That's an easy connection to make. But when the connection between selling office space to elevating the world's consciousness is like, I don't really know what that means. You know, what is that? It's just like, and so I think we lost the connection a little bit between our vision and what we were actually offering to the world. So that was just one of that. There's many other reasons, but I think that's one. So the point of this one is the narrative has to be so clear, both internally first, because every change in the world starts with you getting your team and employees excited by what you're doing. But if that even starts getting murky, then the market's just going to get way confused. And then, so I think we started getting too confused about what our core purpose was. So that's just one example. Another example, when I look back on some of the other companies that I've been at that maybe have not succeeded as much, it's probably been around, let me think, honestly, a lot of macro conditions or market being saturated. When I think back on like one of my early days and I want a company that failed, I worked for a Swedish company that did two-factor authentication in 2005. And they were doing like two-factor authentication on mobile devices. And honestly, they were just a little bit ahead of the market. The market was not ready for two-factor authentication because phones weren't good enough. So it was kind of a kludgy user experience. The vision of like using your phone as an authentication device, I think made a lot of sense, but the market was not ready for it. And we ended up not succeeding really as a company. So there's many factors. It's hard to like say there's one common thread that goes through it all.
And usually it would be so difficult to figure this out before you're actually in the company, because inflated WeWork, everybody wants to be there, wants to be the CMO. All my friends are saying, okay, let me try this out. Or two-factor authentication. Oh, this is innovative. I can definitely sell this.
Totally.
But how would you distinguish? You had both experiences in early stage startups and the larger ones. So why choose one or the other in your career, and what did it give you?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. It's So also just to clarify, so after I left WeWork, I decided to speak to as many companies as I could, and luckily my network is decent, so I get introduced to a lot of cool entrepreneurs and founders, and I have the spreadsheet. I spoke to close to 100 companies in a few months, and it's just like it's not all of them wanted to hire me. Just to be clear, I'm not. But it's just like, hey, you should talk to Robin about branding or strategy or IPOs and get some advice. So it's a lot of like giving advice, and some of those conversations would turn into, hey, are you interested in joining, and so on. But I spoke to close to 100 companies, and I still have that list. And it's so funny looking back to all the companies I spoke to. And I ended up, of course, joining Matterport, and then we went public, about a year after I joined. So, but I did not know that at the time, to be clear, which is also where, I mean, a little bit of like, maybe it's subconscious pattern recognition because I'm older and I've done this for a while. Maybe it's a little bit of luck, of course, right? But some of these companies are not around anymore that's on the list. And some of them, did better. I thought we were going to, when I joined Box, for example, in 2011, I was kind of talking to Aaron Levy, the CEO, and he's like, 12 to 18 months, we're going to go public. 36 months later, we're still not public, right? So it took much longer. And Matterport was kind of the reverse. It was like, oh, we're hoping for an IPO in the next 3 to 4 years. Then, of course, COVID came and it accelerated the market, and we ended up going public a year later. So it's just like luck also honestly plays into it, but maybe it's luck combined with right place, right time, right network, pattern recognition, and so on. So in terms of like the question around what size company, so I joined Vera at 8 employees. Box and Matterport, and now LMS 365 is around 200 employees, each of these companies. Salesforce was about 1,000 employees. And WeWork and LinkedIn were about 10,000 each. So maybe closer to 15,000. And I've just come to the realization, I thought when I was at an early stage startup, there was so much joy. I mean, even though I had the CMO title at Vera, I was doing everything. There was no other people than me. It was me and a bunch of engineers. So I was in there putting together IKEA furniture in the weekend and filling up the coffee, in the break room and so on. And I loved it. It was kind of like so fun to be a part of that journey. And I just got to hire everything. But there's also a lot of like, when you're at that early stage, I mean, there's so many uncertainties. And I feel like always like you take 2 steps forward and then you get punched in the face, because product falls through or funding falls through or a customer gets pissed off or a person leaves your company. It's like everything just has amazing impact on you. Of course, at the opposite end of the scale, when you're at 15,000 employees, those impacts are much less. So that was one experience. And it was really fun for where I was in my life because you really got to like do everything. Then when I went to WeWork, the team was several hundred people at WeWork around the world. And I was busier than ever. It was such a crazy, chaotic time. It was super intense. And I did everything and I did nothing, meaning that I was in meetings all day long, always guiding, unblocking, strategizing, giving feedback to team members. But actually, there was very little of me doing things myself, because you have teams to do. You have lots of people to actually go do the digital campaign or the brand campaign or whatever it is. So you're in part of it, but you're not actually doing it, which is a very different way of operating. The reason I've liked this kind of like scale up journey a lot, it's just right for me. So you both get to lead and guide and strategy, but you also get to do a lot. I still like getting my hands into kind of the thick of things. And you come in at a point where there is a culture, but you get to accelerate and kind of morph it into something even better, right? Because you have some good foundation to stand on, but you also get to like change it based on your experiences. And so at the early stage, I mean, there's really no culture. You're building it all, right? And at this big scale, when I came into LinkedIn, my ability to impact change with over 10,000 people is minimal, honestly, right? I mean, and same at WeWork. Of course, being senior, you can, but it's just hard. But that's 200, 300, 400 people journey. It's super fun, you kind of get to do it all. You get to lead. It's the best of all worlds to me in some ways, and there's still so much to do and fix. And I think of it this way. There was one person who said to me when I joined LMS 365, why are you joining this company? I've never heard of them. It seems like you should be joining something way more flashy. And I said, that's exactly why I'm joining it. Because I like to join a company that nobody's heard of. And then hopefully one day, if I do my job well, you've heard of this company, right? But I mean, when you go into a company that's number one, if you go join Google or Apple or Facebook, there's nothing wrong with that. Great on your resume. But those companies have been number one. Not all they can go is all they're doing is defending their position all day long because they're already at the peak, right? I like getting to the peak. I think that's super fun, that journey.
So cool. Given the experiences you've got, are there any of the experiences at the job that you took you would not like to repeat?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing that became really clear on is I like being with people. Like, so for when I was at Matterport for the last 2 years, during COVID, I joined right in March 2020, and I was there just about 2 years or so. And objectively, we successfully took the company public and we scaled the company, but never once met my team. And of course, it's
Mhm.
COVID and so on, but it was just honestly, I lacked the joy of being together. I don't need to see people every day. I still work kind of 50-50 or part-time remotely and so on, which I quite like when I need to do deep work. But I just had the realization personally that I like being with people. Like the idea of me just sitting 100% in front of a screen by myself is not for me. I'm 100% certain. This is just not, doesn't fit with my character, my personality, the way I like to lead. I think, again, there's some things like you and I know each other, so you and I can actually easily have a virtual call. But when you're trying to get to know people, I feel like it's much harder, honestly. Um, and I've just like, again, for I think for leadership roles and for certain roles, certain jobs, I think it's just harder. But there are other roles that they're eminently perfect for. But I've just had the realization it's just not for me. I like being with people. So this idea of just like 100% remote work, I did not want to join a company that was
No.
100% remote. I wanted to have the opportunity to see people. That's one thing. And then the second thing is it's really just about I would say culture. I've been in some cultures. I feel like when I look back, that were not very joyful. I'll give you an example. So when I came into Box, 200 people, we were doubling in size, and it was so fun. Aaron Levy is one of the best, I think, CEOs of our time, and he was just like so caring and thoughtful, and had such a growth mindset about always becoming a better version of himself. And we were scaling, so we're hiring a lot of people very quickly. And I felt like the culture, and I said this to him when I left the company, the culture has gone from we have all these big challenges, which you always do as a startup. I'm sure you do as well. You have these big challenges, and we would go into a conference room and we'd talk about how we could solve them together. And when I left, we were about 1,000 people, and I was like, we would have these big challenges, and we'd go into a conference room and we talk about who's not doing their job or who's to blame. And I just like it doesn't feel like a culture that supports each other, trusts each other, develops like the right operating rhythm or culture or alignment. It's just not something that inspired me. I'm like, how are you supposed to, again, coming back to doing the best work of your life, if you feel like you're constantly on guard for what people think about you or do?
Yeah.
Like, it has to be an implicit trust. So I look for that in companies a lot, and it's hard to suss out. To be clear, it's not an easy thing to like check for. So luckily, right now, you can back channel. There's online resources. You can. I used to have a hack that I used to, but it's harder nowadays with remote work. I used to go in to a company in an office, and I used to come in, and it's a little dorky, maybe because I'm Danish, but I would show up 30 minutes or an hour before to just see how people interact. I mean, like back to my Uber example, I
Yeah.
want to see how people engage with each other and talk to each other, and like what kind of vibe there is.
Yeah.
It just matters a lot to me. It really does.
I love that. Well, going back to the remote work, we had a
Mm,
conversation about that with our CTO when we were at
mm,
Inbound. And if you're moving the whole company fully remote,
mm-hmm,
like one thing that San Francisco and American companies were moving away and saying, oh, fully remote, let's listen to the employees and so on,
mm-hmm,
are very likely to lose out on is the
mm-hmm,
innovation that is sparked when people
mm-hmm.
work together. If you don't know the person in front of you, well, let's say I'm your colleague, you have no idea
Mm-hmm.
how I am, how I
Yeah,
think, or what ticks, then we would not
totally
be
agree.
able to create cool stuff together. And I totally like adhere to that. I love coming to the office. I love
Yeah,
like seeing how like
yeah,
weird some of the colleagues are, how some of them are totally focused and so on. You know how to
totally.
collaborate and build something cool together.
Completely. I'm so aligned with that. I also think I advise a company called Radius. Amina, Moreau, she's an incredible CEO. She's creating basically like the Airbnb, but for kind of remote work in some ways. And she
Nice.
always says, remote does not mean that you're by yourself. That's also, I think, something to distinguish is the idea that, I can work remotely, but I can still like, sometimes I go and have coffee in a coffee shop with some employees. It doesn't mean being in an office, but just the idea, it's like, being together, I think, is so important when you're building culture or you're brainstorming ideas or you're coming up with new things. I think it's hard. Of course, when COVID hit, right, like many people, I was all like, hybrid work is the way of the future. And I still believe it could work. But I've also come to my personal belief is that it's probably one of the harder ones to make work. I think the other options are actually better, meaning either you decide to be 100% remote where everyone's on equal footing, you have no office, and maybe you get together once every quarter or once a year and so on, like some more social gatherings, but everyone's remote. But then it has some downsides, like to your point, what you said. Or you say, we're in office first, but you're an adult. You can, Laura, if you need to work from home once or twice a week, go for it. I mean, as long as you deliver yourself, who cares where you work? But we do have an office and you can come in when you need to and you can be, but we expect you to be there sometime. I think those two modalities to me feel like more successful, because I hear a lot from CEOs as well. They're really worried about this inequality when you have a hybrid, when it's half and half and some are in, some are not. You lose out on some of the cultural, I think, connectivity, which is so important for creating greatness in companies.
And it's a perfect segue for your post of the day about the culture anchor. Talk me through that and how you think about it, and who do you usually see that person as?
Yeah, I mean, this it's a great question. I think my experience is that there are some people in a company who help lift each other up every single day. And it's easy when times are good, and they're so important when times are not great. And there are always going to be times when things do not go well. And having that person is just like such a force multiplier. I mean, they're worth 10x probably the value of what you give them, that person. I mean, it's hard to quantify, but it's just like, because they give everyone a reason to show up every day. The cultural anchor is so much more important than purely the high performer. Oftentimes, this is where I think about, we oftentimes as businesses, it's one of the personal missions I'm on, is I want to change the way that we reward the work that people do. Meaning, I think right now we just reward outcomes. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter how you get there. As long as you deliver great results, you can be as much of an asshole as you need. And I hate that. That's not the world I want to live in. I've seen too much of that. I'd much rather create a world where we are actually also reporting the inputs and the outputs. Meaning, I think inputs are the way that you show up every day, the energy, enthusiasm, conviction, excitement that becomes a force multiplier for everyone around is so important and should be rewarded. And if not, I think you're rewarding the wrong behavior. And guess what? Those things are things that you control 100%. Doesn't mean it's easy, to be clear, but you can. So Laura, when you show up to work every day, you control your mindset, your attitude, your energy. But it's hard. If you had a shitty day, you had argued with your partner, or some jerk cut you off in the car, it's so many things. It doesn't change the fact, I think, that you control this anyway. So we should reward people who show up, I think, with that kind of like way of lifting each other, because it's so important. And the other thing I think you control 100% is the output that you do. Meaning, like, are you putting out a marketing campaign that you're proud of? Are you putting out a good sales program? Are you creating an HR policy that we think is like amazing and so on? All this stuff actually we control. Mm-hmm. But the outcome of some of these, when we finally release the sales program, the marketing campaign, whatever it is, we actually don't control. Now, it's not an application, I think, of not having goal-oriented outcomes or outcome-oriented goals, because of course, the better input and the better output you have, the more you're going to hit your goal. So if your goal is to, let's say, hit 100 million in ARR and revenue for the next year, well, the better input you have, the better team environment, the more energy and conviction and work that you put into it, you're going to be more likely to hit it. The better output you have, the quality, you stand by it, it's game changing, you're gonna have a better chance of hitting. So you're gonna put yourself on a trajectory of hitting that much better. But my point is, you can't control the outcome 100%. Anybody who tells you so, I think, is full of it, right? And but we live in a world that only focuses on outcome. That's the only thing we focus on. So the cultural anchors, coming back to your question, are so important to getting to better outcomes. If you want the greatest outcomes, you got to create an environment where people want to show up every day. And the cultural anchor in your team, and we all have them. We all have these people we look at and go, wow, the energy when people show up in the office is just amazing. Because the reverse is also true. You have probably people when they show up, you're like, oh, it's a little heavy, you know. It's like we all have those, right? And so the cultural anchor really makes a difference. I want to reward and talk about them a lot more.
And I think for each and every company, it would be also important just to speak about that part. How do you show up? You don't have to be the cultural anchor, but as long as you show up with the most positive yourself, that you would like to leave a good feeling for other people inside of the company. Right. Nobody wants to work with an asshole. If you left the your work today and somebody thinks you're an asshole, that might be that you ruined that person's day as well. It's like, don't do that.
Exactly.
Don't be that person.
That's
Just
right.
like
That's right.
leave it better than you met the person. That's kind of a
It's so true. It's so true.
yeah. I love that. Love that a lot. Robin, you are a gift. Really. It's so nice to talk to you. And I will finish this off with a story. So I was biking back where I was biking back from a run. Yes, of course, from a run. I was biking back from a run that we were running with Contract Book from the meatpacking district,
Hmm.
and I'm biking down his Tech Barbecue during that day. I was not a part of it, but I can see Rasmus walking, your CEO. I was like, oh, I need to say hi to him. I just stopped over. I said, oh, hi, Rasmus. I just wanted to say hi. I never met him before, really, but I saw him from your LinkedIn post. Hey, Rasmus, like, what a cool hire you did. I was like, how's it going with Robin? He said, yeah. So it's really amazing. Like we were growing really nicely, like 5 to 10% every year. We've been very happy and very successful. And then we found Robin, and he says, this is not good enough. How can we do 2x, 3x, 5x? And let's make a plan for that. So, oh, okay. So we're going, like, we're sitting down into his rocket now. So he's happy. Everybody's just really happy to have you.
I appreciate you telling. I've not heard that story before, but I appreciate it. I mean, but this is all about just assembling a team of amazing people who want to do this. And this is what feels like my life mission. I'm so happy when I met you. I mean, you and I share a lot of energy. I mean, I think you have like next level energy, and it's just like amazing having those people around because it inspires me every day. Really, it's like I can learn and grow. It's like just by being around people who just make me think bigger and differently about things. So cool.
Let's finish off with that. Thanks everybody for listening. This is going to be a podcast later, and listen up and reach out to Robin on LinkedIn if you've got questions.
Please do. Thank you,
Thank
Lars.
you,
Great to see
everybody.
you.